At this time in our service, we're going to turn the message over to Brother and Dr. Jim Frederick.
Good to see everybody this morning. My last lesson, while I was preparing the lesson, I ended up reading Zechariah a little bit, and got interested in Zechariah and just kept studying. So this is where our lesson's going to come from today. And I think we can all learn from it. I certainly learned a lot in reading it and studying about it and so forth. So Zechariah is numbered among the minor prophets. Every time you read about the minor prophets, they say not to put too much stress on the word minor, because these in prominence, these are very important people, very important messages. I remember years and years ago, I'd come in from college a little bit, and I was talking to Brother Lawrence, he up at the service garage, and I told him I just read through the minor prophets, and I said, well, there's just a lot to learn. And he said, I'd say, and then I got to thinking about that while I was preparing this message, and I think that was his way of saying, well, duh. So there's a lot to learn there, and it certainly be I'm glad to be a part of trying to relay some of that message on what was happening. Zechariah was very closely related to Haggai, that's the book just prior to Zechariah. And they were co-prophets. They were working together in Israel and as prophets on the return of the portion of the Israelites from slavery, from bondage, from Babylon, basically. But they were in bondage all over the world. They'd been scattered all over. And these two men were prophesying in that time. What had happened is that God had sent many prophets to His children, and they refused to obey, and God allowed the great powers in that day to overtake them and take them into slavery. But in 538 BC, King Cyrus of Persia defeated Babylon. And in that same year, he decreed that the Jews could return to Jerusalem. And they'd been in bondage about 70 years, is approximately 70 years. Haggai he had a very short prophet period. He only preached about 4 months. But Zechariah was born in Babylon, and he was much younger, and he preached many years. The Jews went to work on their temple, and by 536 BC, they'd finished the foundation of their temple. And but their neighbors, their political people around the neighbors, they dreaded to see a new temple or a unified Jewish nation. So they started working against the completion of the temple, and they used some force. They used mostly, I think, politically. They'd gone to Cyrus, and they caused such a fuss over such a long period of time that by 530, the building of the temple stopped. And this is where Haggai and Zechariah came in. These men were encouraging the Israelites, the Jews, to continue their work on that temple, finish that temple. Of course, they had a lot of other things in their prophecy, in their preaching. They were concerned about the moral character, the moral morality of the Jews, and and they preached on that. Now Zechariah, which I thought was very interesting, Zechariah was called, and he had 8 visions, which were apocalyptic, and they all came on one night. He had 8 visions in one night, and these 2 books were very precise in their dating, in their history. Zechariah was called on February the 15th, 519 BC. That's an awesome thing to say. That's when it happened. That he was called, he saw these visions. I learned about visions too. You know, to me, I didn't understand exactly what a vision is. And whether it was the individual was in a trance or was he asleep. No, he was awake. You know, down here in Zechariah 4:1, Zechariah was awakened. They wanted to make sure he was awake when he got this vision, in the 5th vision. But during that one night, he had 8 visions concerning Israel. I'm going to go over these visions briefly. They were apocalyptic. He was teaching him in a way that God can understand and that servant can understand. The first vision he had was a man standing in the myrtle trees, and there were 4 horses. And of course, I had to rely on commentaries and everything just to understand what this was all about. But here, what he was saying is that the 4 horses had gone out and looked through the world, and they found, or the symbols, they found that the world's at peace, but God's people was still enslaved, and God was not pleased with that. In Zechariah 1:14, I'm very jealous for Jerusalem and Zion, but I'm very angry with the nations that feel secure. I was only a little angry with Israel when he was allowed to overtake them and take them into slavery. I was only a little angry, but they added to the calamity. In other words, they went too far. They've done too much to my people. So in Zechariah 1:16, therefore, this is what the Lord says: I will return to Jerusalem with mercy, and therefore my house will be rebuilt. So it was God's intentions to rebuild Zion. He had a great purpose for it. And this is all to be revealed in Zechariah. You know, we can't in any way give Zechariah, I'll be honest with you, a real service. It's a great book to study, and it's got a lot of depth. I think there's hundreds of years covered in his prophecy. Many nations, Syria and Babylon and Greece and Egypt and Rome, all these were covered in Zechariah's preaching. And vision 2, there was 4 horns, which means power. Horn is power. And there's 4 craftsmen. And what he's saying here, that those nations that made it so tough on my people will also have it tough. He was going to go back and punish those people for being religious. Vision 3 is a man with a measuring line. And this was to say Jerusalem would be built in full. It would be restored, maybe even beyond what anybody could imagine. But he would rebuild the city. And in Vision 4, they show Joshua, the priest, standing before an angel of the Lord dressed in filthy clothes. So what happens is they take those clothes off of Joshua, put them on clean clothes. And then Zechariah said, let's put a clean turban on him too. That was his statement, and they did. And what they were saying was Israel was sinful. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen to God. But now he's going to clean it up, and they're going to be a different nation. The angel of the Lord gave this charge to Joshua. This is what the Lord Almighty says. if you walk in my ways and keep my requirements, then you will govern my house and have charge in my courts, and I will give you a place among these standing here. God had future plans for Israel. The fifth vision was a gold lampstand and the two olive trees. It was to show that God was behind the restoration of Israel. There's going to be an effort, man's effort. Man does it usually is. Man has to put his part in, but God's behind it. And it shows that there's going to be. It shows that there is a big reservoir of oil, and God's going to supply that for the light. In Zechariah 4:6, so he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, who was the governor who was leading the rebuilding of the temple. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord Almighty. He was behind it. And he also made mention here, and we see it other places in the Bible, that the faith in the Spirit of God can move mountains. That's where our faith should be. The sixth vision is the lawbreakers are condemned by the law. Sinners will be purged, so there will be a purging. I've lost page 7, but we can make it through. So that the first 6 chapters were these visions that Zechariah had, and the message was that that city's going to be rebuilt, that God's going to stand by it, that he doesn't want his children put back into bondage like that. And as part of the history, when Alexander the Great made his tour, his struggle down through the Middle East, they spared Jerusalem. It wasn't torn down. Everything else was pretty much, but that as a consideration when all these other countries were torn apart, Jerusalem stayed standing. The rest of the book after chapter 6 are some oracles, and the one and I've got left is Zechariah 9:9, where he's telling of the Messiah, and he's saying that because they refused the Messiah, that there would be dire consequences, which we know what happened. That when the Messiah appeared, the king priest appeared. They turned him down and refused him. In Zechariah 9, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So we remember that. That's the way Jesus came into Jerusalem that day. That was part of that messianic message. In the meantime, he'll be taking care of Zion. Zechariah 9, 8, and 12. Let's see. But I will defend my house against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for now I am keeping watch. Verse 12, return to your fortress, O prisoners of hope. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. So it'll be a greater city and much more influence, of which we know what happened. In 10:6, I will strengthen the house of Judah and save the house of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them. they will be as though I had not rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. So, He will, and we know that Jesus did come, and we know that they rejected Him. But until that day, He was going to stand by His Jerusalem. In Zechariah 11, 7 through 13, the flock detested me. This is the Messiah. The flock detested me, and I grew weary. No, this is God. The flock detested me, and I grew weary of them, and said, I will not be your shepherd. Let the dying die, and the perishing perish. Let those who are left eat one another's flesh. And that was true during the captivity in 70 AD, when Romans, there was cannibalism. Then I took my staff, called favor, and broke it, revoking the covenant I had made with all the nations. It was revoked on that day. And so the afflicted of the flock who were watching me knew it was the Lord, is the word of the Lord. I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So pay me 30 pieces of silver. And that's a familiar term too. That's what they paid for Jesus. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter. God didn't think that was quite enough. Throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they priced me, which is sarcastic. He said, it was a very small price. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord to the potter. So that was a very small price, but they refused Jesus as the Messiah, and then in AD 70, the temple was torn down again. The verse 12 through 14 was a very difficult 2 chapters. It was another oracle, and it was a lesson on the day of the Lord. And we see this term other places in the Bible, and that we find it in other prophecies and so forth. And it would be a time that very difficult for us to imagine. God knows what it is. He recognizes there'll be a day with no night or day, and he understands what that is. But it's hard for us to understand that. And so, but the message there is, and as the whole book, is that God is in control. He is the victor. He's the one that's going to take all these nations, and that's what the day of the Lord is. When all these nations come together against Jerusalem, and God will defeat them. And the whole message, in Zechariah, the whole message is that he's the one in power. So I'm going to have a song of invitation. If someone here has got that desire to come forward, come on up.